All right. Hello and welcome to this week's episode where we're going to talk about mental health, recovery, and telling the truth. And I want to just talk about this idea of telling the truth, primarily in this episode. And this actually might be a series that I'm going to do in the next weeks to come. Because while it sounds so simple, I often think that this is something that's just so overlooked that, it's become just almost something we just completely dismiss and ignore, right? And, and I was thinking about this more and more, like right now we live in a time of an integrity imbalance, right? From everything down, right? I mean, even internally, many of us are at a complete imbalance of even self-integrity. Like, think about it. How many times have you told yourself you're going to work out tomorrow or, not eat something that you're not supposed to eat, and then you go and do it, right? I mean, what is that? That's self-integrity, right? Like you're saying you're going to do something and then you lie to yourself, right? And it's like, well, why do we do that? Right? And because truth and integrity on every level is just so important to recovery in whatever you're doing, right? I mean, we're talking about a societal recovery or an individual recovery, right? And so I wanted to talk this week about telling the truth. And what got me thinking was I remember a quote from a movie called Kingdom of Heaven, and that has Orlando Bloom and Liam Neeson, and anyways, in the movie, Orlando Bloom's getting knighted, right, by this group, and part of his oath is to tell the truth, even if it leads to your death. And I remember hearing that and just thinking, like, that's such like a radical statement. Like, why would you tell the truth if you knew it would kill you? You know what I mean? Why would you hold that kind of level? And I just, dismissed it and as just something that I thought was, foolish, right? But as I started to think about this more and more, and I think one of the main problems that a lot of people are having, especially as, in the States anyway, where in California, we're having this problem of not reopening, right? And in many cases, we actually don't have information as to why we're maintaining this lockdown. We're watching other people. And so a lot of people are seeking for the truth, right? They want to know what is the reason, right? What are the real numbers, right? Are there real numbers, right? And all these people are leading to doubts. And so it got me thinking of this idea of the truth. And the reality is that we are living in a time, like I said, of integrity imbalance. And what we're noticing, especially from a media standpoint, is that it's not necessarily important to be right as it is to be first, right? Or to, get the most views, the most clicks. And again, we're talking about either side of the spectrum here, right? Right, left, indifferent, doesn't matter, right? When you're watching like headlines of articles, all it's designed to do is to get an emotional charge out of the viewership, to get clicks, to drive. It has nothing to even do most of the time with truth. And, if we even look at our language, I was talking about this with a friend the other day, we expect deception and lying almost, from even our closest friends. I mean, think about the time you're telling someone something and you say the words like, hey, don't tell anyone, you promise, right? We force them to make a promise not to lie, right? Because it's like we almost expect it on some level, right? And it's become just part of the norm. And it's like, my goodness, like, how is that okay, right? And so I started thinking about all this stuff, and obviously influenced by several books. I mean, two of which, if you have the 4 Agreements, right, by Don Miguel, and 12 Rules for Life by Dr. Jordan Peterson. And I was thinking about, like, they have these simple chapters, like one of which is, in 4 Agreements, the author talks about be impeccable with your word, right? The idea of being without sin and with your word. And then in 12 Rules for Life, Dr. Peterson talks about the idea of telling the truth, or at least not lying. And I started just asking myself more and more, like, okay, why is it so important? Right? Why is telling the truth so important? And let's spin that question, because I think a lot of us are looking at this idea of looking for truth, but let's look at the question of, well, why do we want truth, right? And first, let's start off with this idea of, well, why do we lie? And if you think about any time that you've lied, and I know, some of you might be, well, I've never lied. Okay, well, that's obviously not true. You're lying right now, right? It's like, we all have done it. And let's think about why we lie. And so usually the first reason someone tells a lie is to control the narrative of that situation, right? Because what they're doing is they're anticipating what would happen if they told the truth, and then they're saying, okay, that's probably going to be bad. Let me control it by manipulating the truth, right? And the other reason is because so that's one reason, just that idea of control, and another reason is the idea of believing that the person couldn't handle the truth if you told it to them, right? And if you think of that idea, it's like you're almost looking at yourself as at this superior level and saying, oh, if I told them, like, there's no way they could handle what I know, right? And okay, look, in some cases, is that true? Like when it talks about, like, me being a father and, telling my daughter as she grows up certain things, yeah, there's probably going to be things that I wait to explain to her, right? Until she's, ready, quote unquote. But I mean, we all do it. And it's like, and asking yourself, like, okay, well, why do we lie so much? And then more importantly, like, is there an appropriate time to lie, right? And really just thinking about that question. I'm not saying I have the answer necessarily, but I do want to, on that note, pitch the idea of some of the problems with lying, right? And again, we also lie to ourselves. That's another thing that I wanted to kind of, really go into, because again, with mental health recovery, with any kind of recovery, self-integrity is probably one of the most important things a person can have, right? If you look at behavioral treatment, and we're trying to eliminate compulsions, or let's even say like something like, if we're trying to change a significant behavior, and if the person's just not honest, their success rate's not going to be that high, right? Because they're just going to continue to lie to themselves. Well, like, I shouldn't have to do this, or, oh yeah, and then say that they did something when they didn't, or whatever, right? And so let's talk about the problem of lying real quick. So I wanted to bring up two problems, right? That at least, and obviously there's several, but I just wanted to talk about some ideas. The problem with lying is, first and foremost, let's just look at it from an individual level, is that you have to now remember two things. You have to remember the truth, and you have to remember the lie you told, right? And you also have to remember who you told that lie to. Because if you're telling the truth to one person and a lie to another, well, that's a lot to remember, right? It's a lot. It's just like this extra layer of things that you have to take on now. And the other problem is this idea of manipulation, because when you feel like, and most of us can relate to this, when you have been lied to and you've been lied to, it's a bad feeling, because what you're ultimately experiencing is you're experiencing someone manipulating you, someone telling you something because they want to control something, right? And you're essentially kind of a pawn on that chessboard. You're feeling manipulated, which is why I think there's such a discord going on right now between the average person and media across the board, right? Is because if someone's lying to you, it means that they're essentially manipulating you, right? Because they don't feel you can handle the truth, or they want to control what you believe, right? And that idea of lying, it makes sense that we feel like angry when someone lies to us and stuff, because again, the truth is important. Now, let's talk about why the truth is important, right? And because a lot of us are pursuing this question of, okay, well, what is the truth, right? What is the truth right now, especially when it comes to this pandemic? But let's just broaden that out to like just wanting truth, right? We want to know the truth. Well, why is the truth important? And if you really dig into like some of the philosophy behind this with people like Plato or Nietzsche or Immanuel Kant, you'll see, this idea of really digging into this truth, right? And, there's people have spent their whole lives arguing on this concept and really studying this concept. But the reality is truth is valuable because it enables us to see how the world really is, right? We know that we're seeing the real stuff, right? We're seeing the truth, right? And I think that's kind of why many of us crave truth. We want truth, right? Because we want to know what is really happening. Because if we're operating in an illusion, all of our efforts are misplaced, Think of times that you've been deceived and have done things with that belief, that false belief, and how all that effort is just kind of fruitless, right? You have to start with truth in many ways, before you embark on any kind of mission. And, and so to circle back to that idea of like, okay, hey, tell the truth, even if it leads to your death, right? And I'm not saying I promote this idea, but it was just such an interesting concept. I asked myself, I'm like, okay, well, why would someone adopt a vow like that? Well, if I even look at, just my own recovery, things like that with mental health, and, anxiety treatment and stuff. If I thought that I had to tell the truth, right, with everything I was doing, I asked myself how different my life might look, right? Like if I knew I couldn't fib or lie or something like that, right? I really do think that most of us would live pretty dramatically different in many ways, right? Like, I made a simple analogy when I was talking to my wife about this, like, our baby's having trouble sleeping, right? And I was like, sometimes I get stressed out because, if she doesn't sleep her full, 30, 40 minutes, that causes, some stress in our household right now. And, sometimes like she might sleep 30, but I'll be like, oh yeah, she slept 40 minutes, and I'll lie. I mean, if I'm really just being honest. And again, because if we go back to it, it's the same reasons. But what if I and I asked myself just this question alone, like, hey, like what if I really started living in this idea of like telling the truth and holding myself to that standard about as to the best of my ability on that. Not only so I don't have to remember different, versions of the truth, but also just like, how would I live if I knew I had to tell the truth, right? In your recovery, when we talk about bringing it back down to like anxiety recovery or eliminating unhealthy behaviors, what if you had to be honest about that, right? How different would you behave if you had to be honest, right? And just the importance of starting with the truth in recovery on every level, from a personal level to a relationship level to a country level to a global level, right? Like, truth is important, right? And it's something that, like, instead of just always asking, like, even asking what is the truth, as opposed to that, like really understanding why we need the truth, I think is such a foundational step to, because if we have the truth, that's where we can build from, right? And yeah, so in many ways, and again, and I've watched, as a therapist, I've watched many times where the lack of authenticity, right, not being able to be authentic and be yourself and be truthful, I mean, that can just eat someone from the inside out, right? And I think it can do that on a country, a company, a family, all sorts of scales, right? And I really do think that lying kind of festers in there and just pollutes, right? You hear that term, the web of lies, right? What does that mean? I mean, it just spreads and expands. And anyways, it was just some thoughts I wanted to pitch out this week. Not saying that I have every answer. I don't. And again, as we embark on this new series, I mean, it's something that I think I'm going to be talking a little bit more about, because I just think it's something that's escaped many of us, and we don't even see that as an issue, which is what's really scary in many ways. So, just starting with that idea with yourself. Again, always starting with yourself, because again, we heal from the inside out, right? If you want honesty, practice being honest, right? And if you really had to hold yourself to a high level of integrity, right? Would you change? Right? Would you be different? And if so, it's like maybe practicing that this week. Maybe instead of those little lies that you might tell, deciding to be honest right then and there and taking that stance and just maintaining, hey, I'm going to tell the truth, right? And again, there's so much reading you can expand on this if you want to, but again, we have a bunch of resources. Again, if you're struggling with things like anxiety or mental health, over at restoredminds.com, we have free downloads, free assessments for you to get started over at our just restoredminds.com. Again, and if you are finding this helpful, we really appreciate your support by subscribing, liking, commenting, sharing, anything you're willing to do. We very much appreciate on all our platforms. So it's Instagram, Facebook, the podcast, YouTube, all of it. So all your support really, it does mean the world to us. And thank you to everyone for, the great comments and everything that's being sent our way. I just wish you guys a great week as we continue to ride through this time together. We're going to continue to be here to support you. Again, we're running in our community membership. We're running live coaching calls every week. So again, if you want support, feel free to join us for those. And again, you can do so right over on our website. So thank you, everyone. And again, there's some links down below for your help and resources. And again, we just want to wish everyone a happy week, healthy week, and just thank you for tuning into the show and supporting us. Take care, and I hope you have a good day.